Hi, and welcome to the Simply Connected podcast, your go-to spot for discovering new connections. On this show, we get real about the power of human connection through genuine, candid conversations. Through these conversations, we explore how human interactions help to shape our experiences and ultimately help to define our identities. My name is Lauren. I'm your host, and I'm so excited to have you here with us today. I am a huge country music fan. I love a good yoga class or any movement class, and I am a huge movie and TV lover. And with that being said, my love of music spans all genres, and we have the privilege of having the new swears make the music and allow us to use it for this podcast. As well, for your listening pleasure, we have the Simply Connected playlist, which you can find on Spotify, and we will always link it in the show notes. But this playlist is for you to go and listen to. We'll be adding songs to it bi-weekly, and there'll be songs that pump me up, that get me in my feels, but we're also adding songs that our guests love. And the same reasons, the songs that pump them up, that get them moving, that bring them to the dance floor, that get them thinking, that get them, again, in their feels and thinking about all things. So the Simply Connected playlist is available for you on Spotify, and we will always link it in the show notes. In today's episode, we talk to Liz Pearson. Liz is not only our first guest, she is also the one who designed the logo and the cover art for this podcast. In our talk with Liz, we talk all things wedding planning. We talk about the ups and downs, the nitty-gritty of what it means to plan a wedding because she is getting married. We talk about the impact social media has played on our connections and what that looks like. And we also talk about what it looks like to navigate new connections in the workplace, as well as within friends and family relationships, and kind of how those dynamics shift. And just before we jump into today's episode, just like this podcast is under construction and a work in progress, the location where we film is under construction, so you might hear some hammering or banging in the background. Let's roll. We are so excited to be here for the first episode of the Simply Connected podcast. I am here today with Liz. Liz and I have been friends for quite a few years now, and Liz is a marketer. She is a Gemini through and through, and she is a cat lover. Hi, Liz.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here today. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there with those few comments about me. But I am a Gemini. I started in radio broadcasting, kind of worked through that thinking I wanted to be on the air on radio. I have quite an outgoing personality, so it just sounded fun. And then I actually ended up kind of branching into the back end of radio, into the promotional marketing side of things, especially contest marketing, and ended up falling in love with the everything that we did there. And so I was there for quite some time, and then eventually left to go into the marketing world, and I've been here ever since. I grew up in Carleton Place, but left shortly after college and moved to Ottawa, where I've been here ever since with my partner Kiefer. And yeah, just having a blast. I feel like I spend a lot of time with friends and work out when I'm not doing that. And other than that, I just love my trashy reality TV and just chilling out at home.
I love that. And I love that you have a radio background.
Yep.
You have a radio voice. I think I've joked many times that when we talk on Messenger, but sometimes Liz will send voice notes, and I'm just like, creepily, I'm like, oh, I love your voice notes.
I'm just like practicing not popping my P's and, slurring my words and all that fun stuff. Definitely helps. I mean, shout out to college for all of that and all that money I spent just to learn how to speak properly.
Right, how to speak properly into a microphone.
Exactly, and here I am, so it's working.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We like to start off the Simply Connected podcast with a kind of a moment of gratitude, a moment of reflection.
Yep.
So I'm going to ask you, looking back on the last couple of days or maybe the last week or so, what has been kind of like your highest high and then maybe a lower point?
So I'll start with my low, I think, which we'll get into shortly. I'm planning a wedding. I think my low point this week, which isn't like the worst thing that could have happened, but my lowest point was just starting to get really negative about the whole planning process. I think it's easy to get sucked into feeling like crap about something when really there's a positive outcome. So I was feeling kind of negative about all of the last minute things I have left to do and kind of the harder stuff that involves a lot of time and energy. So feeling like that and letting myself get to that point would be kind of my low. The high of my week would be I just came off a really fun weekend with Kiefer's family. We do it every year. We go to their house in Quebec. We do a little weekend party. There's a pool. The weather's always perfect. We laugh a lot. We play a lot of games. There's drinks involved, and it really just fills your cup in a way that I don't think a lot of things can achieve. These people are so great. So I left that weekend feeling very, very tired, but also just very happy to have acquired those people as my family through Kiefer's side. So that would be my high, I think.
Aw, and we're in peak summer season, so
heck yeah.
What good is a weekend outside?
Yeah, we need to be in the pool for sure. So,
that's great. That's great. And so for this series, it's all about building connections, whether it's a known connection, an unknown connection to yourself. Just how many times can I say the word connection in a matter of 30 seconds? But that's what we're here to talk about. And I'm going to jump right away into the first question. What does connection look like to you? What does connection mean to you?
So connection to me is really just having an understanding of each other and not maybe making it about yourself. I think it's important for you to take people for who they are and the best traits about them. And if possible, the negative ones, push them to the side a little bit if they aren't affecting you directly. I think that just having people in your corner who see you for who you are, and you lift each other up, you fill each other's cup. I think that is what makes people connected. I think making an impact on someone, whether you're long-term friends, long-term partners, it's your family or somebody you'll never see again. I think that every move you make in this life will affect somebody else, and I think it's important to consider that as you move. Of course, we're all human and that doesn't always happen. But sometimes the negative impacts that people have on you or you on them actually change them for the better. So I think that just viewing connections in all different ways, shapes and forms is extremely important.
Aw, I love that. Yeah, and that rings true, I think, for a lot of things. Like you said, whether it's a friendship or a relationship or a colleague, things like that. And when I think about connection and the way you just described it, I think back to when we first met. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that was just a connection that blossomed in its own time. But the way we met was so kind of obscure in a way. We had known of each other, I guess, because we had worked together in the past. Mm-hmm. And we were brought together at a conference of all places. Mm-hmm. And I remember the person I was there with. We had gone together to this conference, and I guess there were some other people from where we had worked together. And we had never really spoken. We had never really done anything together. Yeah. And the two of us were like, I think in order to make this experience the best, we need to branch out. We need to meet new people. We need to build those connections. Exactly. So we walked over to your group and in the most awkward way just stood there and we're like, hi, I'm Lauren. Nice to meet you. Yeah. And you're like, I'm Liz. And from that moment, we went into the first seminar or workshop or whatever it was that night. And I just remember giggling throughout the whole performance of this. I think it was it was the opening night of the conference. Right. It was like a magician or something. Yeah. And we were just constantly whispering and giggling. And I think from there, it just grew so naturally.
We're like, let's turn this into a group chat. Yeah. And we started a phone group chat right away. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like I was kind of in the same boat. It was, I didn't know a lot of people. I was really, really new to that job as well. And I remember just meeting you and your colleague and just being like, what a great way to kick things off and just feel a little bit more comfortable in a setting that you were already kind of nervous about, just because you didn't know anyone and you didn't know how it was going to go. And you were kind of stuck there for a few days. So you kind of had to figure out how to navigate it and feel comfortable. And I remember that same setting you're describing where we were all just hanging out at this event. And I was like, thank God, we're going to get through this. Like, we're going to be okay. We're going to get through the next 4 days and we're going to have some fun. So yeah, it's just such a great way to kick that off.
Yeah. And it leans itself to the feeling of connection too, right?
Yeah.
I think to your point of when you touched on some connections can kind of have a negative impact and still change your life. There's always kind of that gut feeling, that initial reaction of when you meet someone, you know that they're going to be in your life. And I think at that moment when we met each other, it was just like, no, I think this is a much deeper connection. This connection is going to go somewhere.
Yep.
We're meant to take many paths, many journeys, many adventures together.
Yep.
And just watch it blossom.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had the same feeling about you and the other person who was there. I feel like there was a lot of small things also that we noted about each other really quickly as we were starting to kind of get to know each other and kind of cover all the basics. And one thing I remember in that those connections we were making was the other person that was with us actually had worked with my partner before I even knew of her. So it was really funny to make that connection and just know that there was other, kind of invisible strings that were bringing us all together, and just made it easier and easier to break the ice. So that was cool too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess on that note, your partner, you are engaged, gonna be married soon. How did you meet your partner? How was that? How did that feel in your life when you met that connection?
Oh, buckle up for this one, because he'll love that I'm talking about this. You know him well.
Of course.
You know him well. Can I say his name? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. My fiance's name is Kiefer. And he
not Kiefer Sutherland.
No, but named after Kiefer Sutherland. Fun fact, little connection there. And we actually met in high school. He actually moved away from a city just because it was time for a fresh start for him and his family. And so they ended up coming from the city into Carleton Place. I mean, he'll say it was like not ideal, but that's how we met. So I guess it worked out. But we met in high school, very young. So it was like, crushes on each other here and there. But at that time, I was going through negative experiences in my, high school journey. I was in a relationship that was ending and it wasn't great. So he and I just kind of, had that connection and that crush, but because of me, it never really went anywhere. And then off we went to, college, and he went out west, and that was that really. He reached out here and there throughout like the next 5 years, but again, I was just kind of doing my own thing, learning a lot about myself. And then he came back to Ottawa and reached out to me, and in that moment I was like, who is this person DMing me right now? Because I didn't recognize his username, but he had said, your cat looks like my sister's cat. And
wow, we just
again,
slide in there.
Yeah, it was like, ooh, wow, know your audience. So he said that to me, and I was like, all right, I'll bite. So we started messaging, and then after that, it moved quite quickly. We went on a few dates, and that was like the end of it. And we've been together ever since, and it's been great. So that's a little bit about how we got to where we are. And now we're getting married very soon. So
that's crazy. That's crazy. And Kiefer is just a remarkably human, I feel like. And the second I met him, I was like, yeah, I can see why this is working. I can see why this is end game. Okay, like this is end game. Liz and Kiefer are getting married so soon, and I can't wait to see that.
And you're a big part of it now too, which is so special. Is like another reason why, like, we came from such an interesting situation, but now you're like part of my big day, and you're really helping with that too, which is like so special in itself. So
yeah, and I think too, like, again, everything is just so woven together. And I think my background in events and community and all that atmosphere, just like, again, it intertwines, and to be supporting you on your big day.
Exactly.
And like you said, to be, I wouldn't say a big part of it, a small part of it, and making sure that the day is exactly what you wanted.
Don't even downplay it.
No, but I'm very excited for the two of you.
Thank you.
So that's Kiefer. And you guys are getting married in a few short weeks.
Yep.
So exciting. Do you think when you think about your relationship with Kiefer and kind of that connection and that stability that you guys have built together as a couple in a relationship, do you think that it's possible to be emotionally connected to someone? Like, what does being emotionally connected look like to you?
That's a great question. I've been, obviously, because I'm getting married, I've been thinking about that a lot, because when it comes to writing your own vows, it's not as easy as it looks. So you can feel all these feelings but not know how to put them on paper. So I feel like this is fresh in my mind. I guess for me, I think, emotional connections do exist, but they're different for everybody. I think that it's really based on like what their needs are, to feel like the best version of themselves. I think for me, Kiefer and I definitely have that in my mind. I think that he sees me exactly for who I am. He treats me as an equal partner in life. There's no, exclusion based on gender or gender roles or anything like that, which is super important to me. I also think that, as you've mentioned before, he's just such a light in everyone's lives, and I think he sees everybody for who they are. So when it comes to being understood, for me, that's the most important part. I think it takes time to learn those things about each other, and your emotional connection gets stronger and stronger as you progress. But for me, it's just, the little things, like, he knows that he needs to make the coffee before bed because I make the smoothies in the morning. Just really, it's just like acts of service and things that, make you feel happy and understood. And I think he does a really good job of seeing those qualities in me. He sees like my not so great qualities as well, and knows that he needs to navigate those a little bit better, in the sense that, if you're choosing to be with this person, for the rest of your life, that those situations are going to come up, and vice versa, right? Like, nobody's perfect. There's anxiety, there's, triggers, there's all these things that we bring with us from our past. So for me, the emotional connection just comes from a really deep understanding and the ability and interest to continue learning about each other as you progress. To me, that's what emotional connection feels like.
Oh. And so when you talk about your emotional connection in a relationship like that, and on the verge of getting married, how do you think emotional connections look in a more platonic relationship when you're dealing with colleagues or friends?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to communication, interpersonal skills, like that type of thing. I think that especially like in a work setting or any sort of setting, when you're around people that you know or don't, you kind of have to be open to taking them for who they are, but also holding them accountable if needed. I think that for work examples, I think that there's a lot of people in work settings that perhaps have a mindset of like they're right and nobody else is right, and I'm not here to make friends and blah blah blah. Which, while you're not supposed to be close friends with anybody you work with, really sometimes it happens naturally, and that's just because you click. And I think that it all comes from a place of understanding and common interests and just being open to seeing others for who they are. So I do think that it can exist in platonic relationships, obviously not as like hot and heavy as it would with a physical connection, but like I think there's ways to just connect on an emotional level, whether it's through something negative you've both been through, whether it's over a common interest that you both love or like to do. I think that does make you feel warm and fuzzy. I do think there is that emotional connection there when you find something that you both agree upon or you both feel understood by each other and you can do those things together. I think that still counts.
Yeah, and I think too, you touched on kind of it a couple times, but I think it's intertwined, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think you can have a solid friendship or even I guess a work relationship without that kind of intertwined emotional connection there. Yeah. And just being able to empathize and to relate to the people who are in your life.
Yeah, and when something bad happens to somebody you care about, whether you're marrying them or they're just one of your really good friends or you work with them, for example, like I had a colleague this week actually that just passed, and I've been at this job for like a year and almost 2 years, like a year and a half now. She had to put her dog down. And like, she's like one of my favorite people to work with because we have a lot of common personality traits and we have a lot of common interests and we have the same sense of humor. But when she told me that she had to put her dog down, like, I felt that. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I feel like the emotional connection comes in there. It's not necessarily based around like loving each other physically. It's just, oh my God, I care about you as a person. I enjoy your company and I don't want that side of you to change because it's my favorite thing about you. However, I understand that by valuing you as a friend and a colleague, like, this side is going to come into the mix. And I was really appreciative that she felt like she could share that with me. And I feel like, being there for her on an emotional level and just trying to, tell her if she needed anything or anything like that. I think that is an emotional connection and it is important in building relationships, whether they're platonic or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes to show too, the level of vulnerability some people can show in certain situations. And like you just touched on your colleague and having to put her dog down, like that's not easy for anyone.
Yeah.
It's like it's saying goodbye to a family member. So being able to be there and to support them through it the best you can just really goes to show that like the connection's all around you.
Exactly and it really like speaks to your relationship, even if they see it that way or not, but they felt okay enough to tell you that because they, like you said, they were okay to be vulnerable in that moment. Like, that means a lot to me in that situation, just that she felt like she could share that with me, because in a lot of working relationships you may not feel like it's appropriate, or you've been kind of conditioned to not act like a human sometimes, and I just don't think that that's the way that the world works anymore, and I just don't think that that theory is dated. I think that our generation is changing a lot of those things, and the older generation who is slowly retiring is leaving, and I think that changes the way that people communicate, especially in a work setting.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. Looking ahead to that day as it approaches so quickly, for you, what does we touched on what connection looks like and kind of that overall big picture.
Right.
How do you bring that down? How do you bring that in? How do you find kind of grounding in all of the chaos that kind of ensues when it comes to whether it's work or wedding planning or anything like that?
Just like an overview of just trying to find like a center, you mean?
Yeah.
Exercise, letting it out, therapy for sure. I find for me, I've tried a lot of things and talking seems to be the biggest one for me. So I find, therapy really helpful because I'm not talking to somebody who has to take that on in a sense that it's not their job to do so, or they're not trained professionally to navigate it. It doesn't cause resentment towards me when I am causing them a lot of additional energy draining. So I would say talking it out during therapy is probably my biggest outlet. But I do navigate exercise, and of course, just like spending time with people who fill my cup. I think that's important as well. Like, if you're having a bad day, as you said, I'm a Gemini through and through, so my social battery never dies. So for me, I like to spend time with people who just make me feel better about myself, especially in days where I'm feeling nervous or anxious. For example, like a wedding, talking to you about little things like, what if I can't find the right shade of burgundy? What am I going to do? What's our backup plan? And you're so like common centering in the sense that like, oh, well, here are some options. And you talk about it in a logical way that brings me back down to earth. So just people who understand you, I guess, is the best way, but you also don't want to push you hard to the point where they feel like they're taking on those problems for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you get to those points of, you said, filling your cup with people who kind of like nurture your heart and your soul and fill you back up, how do you navigate those more kind of tricky situations where it could be maybe a colleague or a friendship where it's not necessarily filling your cup anymore?
I guess like specific example, I guess, could be work. Like if there's somebody that's not filling your cup anymore, I think you can try to communicate that in the best way possible to that person. You can use like the outlets that are given to you within that position, whether it's, somebody higher up, somebody who can give you some like logical advice, something like that. But if you can't, I think sometimes people are conditioned to think that walking away means that you're a quitter or that's not the right thing to do, and that maybe that maybe you're just giving up and it's your fault. But I think for me, in certain situations, just throwing in the towel is sometimes the best thing to do for yourself when somebody's not serving you the energy that you need to feel your best self as well. So that's kind of, you know, in those negative situations, I think if communication isn't working because you're doing your best to be respectful and communicating to them, but they're not reciprocating that and they're not hearing you, or it's not making sense to them, then I think the best thing you can do for yourself is to just take your energy and put it into something else that's going to bring you positive results, whether that's, you know, finding other friends, finding another place to work, going to a different gym if that's bothering you, you know what I mean? Like just any of those things. I think changing things up, people view that as a negative thing a lot of the times, and I just strongly disagree. I think it's best sometimes for yourself to grow that way, and you learn a lot when you change things. And 9 times out of 10, you feel better when you do it. So
yeah. 9 times out of 10, it's those hard things that make kind of the overall scenario better.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's hard when you're in a moment where you're feeling like there's no getting out of it, or you're feeling so negative and you're trying everything and it's not working. It's easy to just give up and be like, well, there's nothing better out for me there because this situation is so bad. Like, how could it get better? Like, you get into this mindset where you almost can't get yourself out. So it's important to switch things up when that comes creeping in, because it can really do a lot of damage if you don't.
Yeah. And I think that's too where you touched on how you keep yourself grounded when you talked therapy and working out. And I think using those outlets to kind of get a different perspective on a situation too can be helpful, and really kind of understanding where your mindset is at that time and how you want to best navigate it without hurting other people, or I guess like creating a bigger situation. And just
know that like you're navigating a situation to the best of the ability you can with someone who understands your brain, like in a way that you don't see it in that moment, and provide you with these resources that maybe like you see it differently, or hey, here's a structure you can follow when you're trying to communicate to someone. Here you're thinking with your emotional mind, but in this situation it's very much a logical mind decision. So like think more logically. You need to separate the two sometimes. Like I think a lot of those tips, we'd like to think that we are also pure minded and that everything is hunky-dory up there, but I think sometimes you're just so set in your ways that being, you know, given these resources from a professional can really change things for you and how you react in situations, for sure.
Yeah. So let's take this for a sharp turn. Okay. And when we're kind of talking about, I don't want to say like the more negative aspects of connection and things like that, but in life, hard situations, negative situations are a part of living. Yep. Can you think back to, I guess, a time, whether recently or not so recently, when you had to navigate one of those tricky situations and really, really kind of put yourself first ahead of this person or this problem, and like how did you navigate that?
So like there's a few situations that come to mind, but I think there's one that's really changed me over the last few years, and I think you know it as well. I think that it kind of goes back to what I had mentioned before, where you're kind of blindsided by a situation, and in your mind it doesn't make sense. You can't really understand why a person would do that to you, or you know, say things about you that you feel aren't true about yourself. You know, I went through a work situation not too long ago that I didn't love. It kind of changed my life in a lot of ways, but going through it was really hard. Looking back now, I don't regret it, because I think that I came out of it with a lot of I learned a lot of things about myself. I have a better understanding of who I am, but going through it and me feeling like my character had been kind of challenged in a situation, it didn't feel good. And I think that navigating out of that, it took some time. I feel like I at first was very thought I could get through it by myself. I thought I could fight my way through it, and I often view a lot of things that way. But I think that I finally hit a point where I couldn't do it on my own. And that's kind of where I spoke with Kiefer and was just like, I don't know what comes next. I don't know what to do. And, we talked about it, and he's gone to therapy before. And I was like, I have never tried it. And that's mainly because I was put in this mindset that going through therapy was maybe a bad thing. And so I was like, you know what, it's worth a shot. Like, I'll try anything. So even after I started therapy, though, it was a lot of like, I'm going to fight my way through it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And then I remember my therapist just saying to me one day, like, what else can we do here? Because this isn't working, right? Like, and that's kind of where my mindset is now. It's like, you can try everything to ensure that you've done everything the best way you can do it. But if it's not working, it's okay to be like, what's next? Because this isn't working. They're not hearing you. You're feeling misunderstood. You don't want to stay here anymore. So what's next? So for me, I think in that situation, navigating through it was a lot of self-growth, but also self-compassion.
Yeah.
Having some better understanding that I didn't do anything. I don't want to be around people who believe that about me. I don't want to be around people who don't stand up for what's right or back you up in a situation where you deserve it or you feel like you deserve to be backed. And if they don't feel that way, that's fine, but it's time to go. So for me, that's kind of how I navigated a situation like that. And now that's kind of how I navigate a lot of my situations, I guess, whether it's a work situation or a relationship or anything like that. I often, make sure that I, present myself to them in a way that they understand who I am, whether they like it or not. And if people are able to kind of help me along the way, then those are the people that I won't forget. But if there's more bad than good, then it's time to exit, Yeah. So I would argue that that's kind of goes back to one of my points prior, but that's kind of how I often view navigating situations.
I feel like you navigate these situations, and I've seen you navigate a number of them, not all bad, but a number of situations, and you navigate them with such poise. Like, you have a very strong head on your shoulders, and thanks. That's one of the traits I kind of admire about you, just because you aren't so reactive. You take a moment, you find that pause, you evaluate kind of all sides of the situation or the scenario or whatever it is, and then you step forward with grace, and you breathe, and you're just like, how do I come out of this the best version of me possible, without hurting people, but also standing my ground?
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it, and I think that means a lot to me, because there was a time when I didn't think that way. I was reactive, and I was explosive, and I did say whatever was just coming out of my head at that time. And again, like, certain situations have taught me how to navigate them differently. And I'm proud of these pauses and this time I take to count to 10 and just think, like, how do I want this to turn out, and what's the best path forward? And it's never to be disrespectful or say anything to anybody that just paints you in a negative light or makes you feel like you're just being aggressive because you're emotional. I like to think with my logical mind a bit more now these days, where, it's like, okay, well, this person is feeling hurt by something I did, or this person, said this. So how do I protect myself? But like you said, also stand my ground in a respectful manner, so that at the end of the day, I'm still being respected, even if they don't like what I'm standing for. Yeah. So, yeah, it's been a long road to get there, but it's something that I'm really proud that I of myself for doing, because there was a time where I would never have done that. So.
Well, you should be proud. It says a lot about growth as a human, as a person, sure. And just that you're willing to put in the work. You're not willing to take the easy way out. You're willing to put in the work for yourself to better yourself and your relationships.
Exactly. Yeah. And if that relationship ends in that moment, then so be it. I think that telling people, what you'll put up with and setting boundaries and all of that stuff is super important, and the right people will stick around.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we talked about kind of how you stay grounded and how you navigate tricky situations. And what would you say, how do you maintain the relationships in your life? Like, what do you put into them, and what do you want out of them to kind of keep pushing those relationships forward in a healthy way?
Yeah, so I think for me, my approach with friendships has always been understanding them and what they need as people, and not assuming that because I have a certain personality, which can be a lot sometimes, that everybody should be that personality. I think trying to go into a friendship just understanding how somebody operates, what makes them tick, what doesn't, what makes them happy, love languages, all those things. I think that having an understanding of what these people are, and if that's somebody that you can spend time with and fill their cup, is kind of how I view friendships and relationships in general. I think that it's gotten me a long way in the sense that I have all types of friends with all types of personalities. And I, even though I'm so social and, I like to go out and I like to have people over and all these things, I understand that some people don't always love to do that. There's times where maybe that isn't like the setting for them. And that being said, like there's a side of me where I also like to hang out with people one-on-one, or I like to go to the gym or just go grab dinner or something. And I think placing those plans and with friends in certain settings, make sure that they're happy, it helps them understand that you see them for who they are, and it's not necessarily your way or no way, right? So I feel like that's kind of how I try to work through my friendships and relationships in general, just because I want to make sure those people know I see you and I respect what you want and need out of life, and I want to be a part of that however I can be.
Aww, I love that. I love that.
I'm like looking into your soul because you're like so quiet, but you're one of my best friends. But I'm like, yeah, I have other friends like you too. And like I've had friends in the past where like I had two roommates for a long time, and one of them was very much like me, like just upbeat, and we got along. We love to go out, we love to have some wine on a Wednesday, like do all those fun things. But on the other side of that, I had a friend, roommate as well, who she was a little bit more quiet and liked to stay in, and she liked to knit and do all these fun little hobbies. And there was times where we'd go and do fun things like that, like we'd go to like Fabric Land, or like I have a creative side. I'm not good at knitting or anything, but I do like to like do the chill stuff, watch a movie, bake, I think that there's fun ways to do things with people who aren't loud socialites like myself. So I just think that you just have to understand people, and you just have to make sure that that they're important to you no matter what their interests are, or what their boundaries are.
And I think too, it's a good balance to have in a group of friends or in a relationship, right? You have your extroverts, you have your introverts, you have a good kind of, you keep each other balanced. And I will say, when it comes to us, you are definitely the Gemini. I am definitely a lot more quiet and reserved, but you fill my cup in ways that I can't even describe. I feel like when I'm hanging with you and with a specific group of friends like that, the energy level is just up here, and it doesn't take me long to get there. But I do notice that when I come out of that group or that situation or that activity, I'm like, whew, okay, like 5 battery depleted. I'm like, I can hear my thoughts again. But it just you have a way of like bringing me out of my shell, which I just love in our friendship. So
yeah, and I think that's important too, because I would also argue that you calm me down, right? Like I would say that like there's a lot of situations where like we are getting crazy and whatever, but then the next day like we're going to the gym, and it's like it's not like that at all, right? So I think that having that balance is so important in any friend group and any friendship, just to make sure you're covering all bases. Because if your whole relationship is just one type of relationship, that's always it's always a bad way to start, because then eventually when you need the other side of that relationship and it doesn't exist because there's been no understanding, it can get explosive really quickly.
Yeah, definitely. When you look at kind of your life so far and all the work that you've been putting into it and the growth that you've experienced alone in this last year and a half with everything that's been going on, can you think of a person in your life, or a person in your life that has kind of really given you a really memorable moment of connection?
There's so many, and I think that like for me it's more of like for like this example I'll give, I guess, is more giving an example of a situation where they might have said something in passing and not thought anything of it, but it's stuck with you for the rest of your life. I think that's kind of where I'll take this question, just because, you know, I have so many memorable moments with people that I still have in my life, in my circle. But this one is funny because I find it's just so simple, and they probably forgot they ever said it to me. So I was like 18-ish years old, just kind of starting out in the radio industry. I had gotten my first kind of job where I saw a future kind of working there. And I was 18 or 19 years old. So I was, you know, hungover before work sometimes. And he might have known this, but anyways, I was a little late. And in my mind, I was like, okay, I start at 10 and it's, you know, it's 9:58. So I'm not late. I'm not like doing great, but I'm not late. But I got there and I remember I really had to pee. And so we had to still pack up the car, and then we were heading to an event because that was kind of part of my job at the time. And I passed him in the hall, and he wasn't directly my manager at this time. He ended up being it afterwards, but he kind of scared me a little bit because I didn't know him, and he was pretty serious, I would say. And at that time, that's how I felt and viewed him. But I passed him in the hall, and I was like, "Hello, how are you?" And all he said to me was, "If you're not 15 minutes early, you're late." And I was like, stunned because I was like, who talks to somebody like that at work? But also I was like, yo, it's true. Like, I was like, that's so true. Like, I'm not a late person. I take pride in being on time for things. I think it's important. I think it's the respectful thing to do. And whether he meant it in a positive way or not, I chose to take it positively because I felt like he taught me something in that moment. And I also still say that all the time. Like, I feel like I've said this to you probably during our friendship, where like we make jokes about some of our friends being late because you and I are the on time ones, and we always like joke about it, not like it's a negative thing because people are who they are. But I think in that moment he kind of changed my view on things, where it was like, if I'm going to choose to commit to something, that I need to be respectful to the person on the other end of it, whether it's a job or plans I made with my friends and family, whatever the setting is. I think it's important to remember that they have feelings too, and they've taken the time out of their day to commit to this as well. And if you aren't respecting that the best way you can, then why should they hold back on telling you how they feel? So that kind of has stuck with me for like the last 12 years of my life or whatever it was. And it's funny to think back on it now because I obviously don't work there anymore and stuff, and he probably doesn't even remember he said this because we're not in contact or anything. But that really did change like my viewpoint on thing. And so that was a connection I think he made to me that I'll hold with me in any relationship moving forward in my life. I still say it. So
and I love that. I love that it was just in a way a small thing, a small moment in time that you had this interaction with someone, and it's something that you've carried with you into your everyday life. Yeah.
And like him and I ended up working for him directly, and like I didn't stay there or anything, and like we haven't kept in touch or anything, but it is really funny to look back on it now because he ended up being like a really good mentor in a lot of ways as well outside of that. But there was good, there was bad. But yeah, he probably would never even know that he said that. He probably just says it to everyone and just like carries on with his life.
It's like his motto. Yeah, walking the halls,
tattooed on his forehead or something.
Oh my goodness. I love that too, that like I said, he probably doesn't even know that's stuck with you. Is there someone that you can think of that is, I guess, more prominent in your life, whether it's a family member or a friend, and this could even just be like a funny story or a good memory, but is there a moment that you look back on now where you're just like, holy hell, I can't believe we did that, or just something that's going to stick with you or go down in the history books of like best moment in time?
Like doing something together, you mean?
Yeah.
Like there's like a few things I could say, I guess, speaking more like to relevant, and I know we've kind of talked about the work thing, but I'll say it again. I think that when I was working with you and your other colleague, and we were going through a really hard time, more so me, but you guys kind of ended up having your own experience as well. I think that even though I left, like I mentioned, I think that I'm really proud of all of us for how we handled the situation. I think that standing up for yourself and putting your foot down in situations where somebody is acting disrespectfully towards you and saying things that, quite frankly, in this day and age just don't fly anymore, not only to you, but finding out that they're doing it to other people. I think being a whistleblower in situations like that is important, regardless of how people will perceive you afterwards. Like, and I think for a holy shit, I did that kind of moment, I think it's like, even though I walked away from that situation at the end of the day, I think we achieved an ultimate goal of a little bit of justice, not only for ourselves, but other people who are suffering through the same kind of treatment, but in the background. So I think that for me, just, you know, off the top of my head, that really stands out to me as a moment that I just felt like I was really proud of myself looking back on it, and proud of the people that I was with and who also stood up for themselves.
Yeah.
Hope that makes sense. It's vague,
No,
but
it's a moment too that I remember and that I look back on, and while it wasn't the greatest of times with what was going on, I do remember nearing the end of that whole situation, and I had bumped into you before we had become really, really good friends, and we were both trying to navigate this this situation. And I had walked up to you, and we exchanged like pleasantries of like, hey, how are you, what's up, what's new. And I remember saying something, but I said something so vague
I'll never
that
forget.
I was like, should I be saying this? And the second it left my mouth, your neck like snapped. You turned to me so quick, like head whip, whiplash, whatever. And you're like, well, what do you mean?
Yeah, I was like, what do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I remember that too, because I feel like we just like connected in that sense. Like we clicked so fast because you didn't know what I was going through and vice versa, and we weren't talking about it. You weren't like, of course you couldn't. But I think like as soon as I kind of caught on to that, you were like experiencing something similar, that we didn't have to say anything. We kind of were just like, you were like, I don't know, are you? And I was like, I don't know. And then I remember saying, I was like, you know what, Lauren, one day we'll be able to talk about this, but today is not that day. And then we were like, yeah. And then I think we hugged, and I was like, I'll text you later. And then we just like, we didn't talk about it until it was in the ground, and here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. that day will go down in history.
Yeah. That's definitely like a holy shit moment in itself. But it also is validating in the same sense, where it's like, oh, other people are also doing the right thing. Yeah. So it felt good for sure.
It definitely felt like a win.
Yes.
A win for us.
Yes, exactly.
But I'm like reliving that moment.
I know, dark times.
But we came through it. Mm-hmm. And when you think of things like that, and just the solidarity of people coming together and supporting one another, and just uplifting people in situations like that, how do you carry moments like that with you into community? Like, what does community look like for you? How do you find your tribe, your people, your it group?
Right. I feel like I have it. So this is like an easy question for me. And I feel like you're a part of that group as well, obviously. So you know exactly the type, like the group I'm talking about. Finding out like who's it like kind of in your community and in your tribe, again, I think it just goes back to like being understood by them. But I also think that people have their own ways of going about things in life, and I think everyone in our friend group is very different. I think you know that as well. I think even in my family too, actually, now that I think about it, like I would say I'm a little bit of an odd duck in my immediate family, just based on the fact that my views are a lot different than theirs in a lot of different ways. And I'm not just talking about like politics, like that's not what I mean, but like you probably experience similar things with your family, where you're just like, you're not seeing eye to eye on things, where people generally don't see eye to eye on things, right? So it's like not unusual for that to happen. But I think when you look at a community or a family or a group of people that like you really love, it's not looking at these like nitpicky situations where like maybe they don't vote for the same party as you, or they have different views on how to handle a situation, how to navigate mental health issues, how much they're willing to forgive when somebody treats them like crap. I think tolerance levels are different for everyone in all different ways. For me, I think that it can't be those small things. It needs to be the bigger things. Like, how does that person make you feel when you guys are together? What do you guys do when you're together? Do you respect each other's differences? Are you willing to like understand that you don't have to be exactly the same person to be together and enjoy your time together? And I think that that's kind of how I view relationships with the people in my core group, because we all have a lot of differences, but I don't think about that when I'm talking about them. When you go to like talk about somebody, oh, how's so and so, you're not like, oh, well, they didn't vote for this party. Like, you're like, oh, actually they're doing so great, they just bought a house, they got a yard for their dog, you know, they're doing great at their job, I'm so happy for them. And so it's just like remembering what's important in life and what at the end of the day isn't worth sacrificing for that positive relationship. And I think that I need people in my corner who do that. And I think that's where like friendship groups and family start to kind of blend a bit. Because family you can't really get rid of unless you really set a hard boundary. But friendships are the same way. Like, do you love each other like sisters and brothers? Do you understand that there's going to be times where you're not going to agree on things, but are you going to communicate after and make sure you work through it? Yes. Okay, well then that's the kind of person I want in my group. So I guess that's kind of how I view it, is just trying to make sure that there's mutual respect. And if there isn't mutual respect and they can't take you calling them on it or vice versa, then maybe it's just not worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, to your point, you can't get rid of family unless you set those hard boundaries or whatnot. But I also think too, your friend groups are your chosen family, right?
Exactly.
Like as cliche as that is,
it's true.
They're the people who are lifting you up, who are cheering you on, who are getting you through those darker periods. So I think finding those connections in those people, and essentially like who is your tribe, who are the people who are cheering you behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to keep you going, and just having those people in your life to keep kind of pushing you forward really says a lot about building that key foundation.
100%, I agree.
And so when you look at your friend group now in comparison, for me personally, I think our generation, our group of people are changing the way of how things are done. And we came up in a really weird time of there being less technology. We were at the forefront of internet. We were still, some of us were still on the rotary phone. Like it was a weird time.
So weird.
And I'm not aging myself here because we're early 90s, we're young. But how do you think technology and social media has played a part in your life and in building your world?
Yeah, like, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think we were the last generation that didn't have that readily available to us, nor was it ingrained in our mind that in order to be a person that was popular or loved or cool is that we had to make sure our like count exceeded 100, or that people were commenting fire emojis, or we were going viral on TikTok. Like, I think I'm really grateful for that. I think that while people are like, oh, you guys are, you know, millennials and you're 30, I think that like mental health wise, like we're so lucky that we can enjoy the positives about those platforms, but we also are very clear on what the negatives are. Obviously, like for me, I think that with my job, it's extremely important. So like I can't get away from it. But I think that sometimes I view those apps and I get worried about these young people because there's so much incorrect or inaccurate information out there about body image and things like that. And I'm sure that you have seen things on there too and just been like, ugh, like I hate myself today because I'm not in Mykonos partying with a DJ. Like, why is that my life?
Why isn't my yacht here
Yeah,
yet?
like where the hell is it? But like, I just think that we're lucky for that sense that we use social media for, in my mind, the right reasons. I fear that for our kids, or, you know, like the younger generations that are like born into a world where they need to have a cell phone when they're like 9 years old. Like I remember my first phone was like from Loblaws or something, and it was like one of those pay-as-you-go phones. You had to buy your ringtones, and I had to buy it myself. Like, and I'm so grateful my parents made me do that, just because it's such a toxic thing to surround yourself with if you're only focusing on like girls in bathing suits at the Victoria's Secret fashion show or whatever it is. So I guess viewing social media and how it impacts me, I think that I have a good understanding of the positives and negatives about it. But what makes me scared is how the people around me view it and what their worries are. That being said, though, I do think there's a lot of positives about that too. Like, for example, TikTok has taught me like a lot of like life hacks, as they call it, where it's like, oh, if you need to like drain bacon grease, but you don't have a jar, like, oh, put it in your sink with the tin foil, or like
the TikTok hacks are
yeah, or like the recipes you find on there sometimes. And for me, like having an autoimmune disease, I find like that sense of like social media where there is a community of like people who are doctors or can at least share their experience of such a specific autoimmune disease where everybody's situation is different. I've felt a little bit more part of understood, because I feel like a lot of situations like medically, like you don't think people are hearing you or doctors are hearing you. So all that to say, I just think that we're lucky to have grown up when we did with it, but I don't know how it's going to go moving forward, because I think it gets worse and worse every day for people to think if they're important enough because of these other things that people are doing. And not to like go on too long about this, but I actually had a friend who I feel like we grew apart for that reason. And we were the same age. We are the same age, sorry. She, you know, it was after college, but she very much like went the path of like wanting to go on these trips. And I'm sure there's a part of her that like wants to do those things and stuff, but also like the way that she went out about her aesthetic and how she was posting, it was very like on brand with like what was perceived on the internet and stuff. And I just felt like I couldn't keep up. Like it got to a point where like it wasn't really anything she did to me personally, like we were friends and stuff, but I just felt like if I was to go around like this group of people that, you know, she was hanging out with or whatever, that I just didn't fit in. And like that didn't feel right to me, just because I wasn't wearing like brand name designer clothes, or that I wasn't, you know, 100 pounds and looking snatched in like a bodycon dress. Like I just started to feel out of place. And that's when it clicked for me that like, this is what I'm seeing on the internet. And while that may be like the it girl, you know, type thing to do, it doesn't make me any less of a person for not being able to fit into that. And I'm not going to break myself down trying to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and she, like, again, this is no shot at her. Like, I think that she does it well and she's like, you know, happy. Like, I don't think she's just doing it for likes or anything, but I do think that it can make you think that you have to be like that in order to be happy. And that's 9 times out of 10 not the case.
Yeah. And you touched on it, but I think it's definitely, there's pros and cons, right? Like there's a time and a place. Yeah. And kind of everyone's perception's going to be different, and what you use it for, I feel like, says a whole lot about you as a person too.
Yeah Bring back the boomerang era. It was fun. We still do it sometimes. Close friends only.
Boomerangs will never go to style.
Close friends only though.
Awesome. Well, it has been so fun chatting with you today, and we like to end every episode with a quick kind of rapid fire to see where you're at right now in this time. So let's fire a few questions your way. Okay. And what are you currently watching?
Oh man, I'm still trying to finish Love Island UK. I'm a reality TV girl till I die. So that being said, we're just trying to get through that. And then we're also really behind on 90 Day Fiancé because there's like a million. Okay. You know what? I like the reality TV. I feel like it humanizes people who like it shouldn't. Yeah. So it's like, it's a good reminder. But outside of that, seriously, things that I'm watching right now, like show-wise or movie, or does it matter?
Either or.
I just watched the new Planet of the Apes movie.
Okay.
And I will say, don't knock it till you try it. Kiefer really wanted to watch it, and I was like, like monkeys freak me out. They do. They're coming for all of us, and this movie proves it. But I was very impressed. I actually really enjoyed it. It was 2.5 hours, and I was dreading it, and I actually wanted it to keep going. So I really enjoyed that movie. So if you haven't seen it, watch it.
Add that to the list.
Yeah, you have a lot of things you have to watch, thanks to me. But
I'm still trying to catch up on Big Brother, and
yes, I'm watching Big Brother, and you need to finish it or start it.
I'll get there. What are you currently reading, or is there a podcast you're listening to?
So I don't read a whole lot of books. I actually do have this one though, from my therapist that I read recently. It's kind of about like family dynamics and stuff. So again, just trying to educate myself and understand past generations and how to break those cycles. But that being said, I'm not like a huge reader unless it's like to better my health, I guess. Like I don't like just read like a romance novel or anything. It's never really been my thing. Podcast wise, I really like Plan Brie Uncut. I don't know if you know that one. Outside of that, Call Daddy's always good. I like the interview style ones just because I like to hear especially reality TV people or celebrities, there's always that perceived like narrative about them. So when they get on a podcast like that, I like to hear what their actual thoughts are, if that makes sense, and how they're actually feeling about a situation, because it's usually not the same. So the Vile Files is good too for that, which I just recently watched that one.
That's a good one too.
Yeah.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be and why?
Damn, this one's hard. I feel like it changes all the time for me. I feel like I don't know. I like the idea of mind reading until I don't. Like I like the idea of just knowing how people are feeling, but I think that would be bad in a lot of ways. I think it would be hard to keep up with that sustainability of hearing negative thoughts about you or like other things that you can't control. I would say like one that doesn't change for me is like teleportation or some sort of like speedy like movement.
Get there faster.
Yeah, like if you wanted to like jump to South Africa tomorrow or something, or like go on a vacation in Fiji, you don't have to hop on like a 10-hour flight. I feel like that would be a cool one. I'm listing off a few because I always have a hard time deciding. I always think that like being immortal would be cool until like people around you aren't, and then you'd be like, ooh. But yeah, I would say like right now it's still like teleportation, because I feel like you would get save a lot of time.
Save a lot of time.
What's yours? Tell me yours.
I think for me, mine has probably always been teleportation.
Yeah.
Only because I like to travel.
Yeah,
I like to see new places. So if I could save myself the 20+ hour flight across the world, then
exactly.
Count me
And
in.
the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just win-win all around. And finally, what would you tell your younger self?
Okay. I feel like for me, like people aren't paying attention to you the way that you pay attention to yourself in the negative ways. I think for me, I still struggle with that, where I have a lot of like, you know, insecure thoughts. You know, body dysmorphia has always been a problem of mine and stuff like that. But then if you really stop and think about how you perceive others, you're never talking about their pant size or how they look in like an outfit that they're wearing. So I think I've struggled with it since I was younger, and it, you know, it comes in waves. But I think if I could tell my younger self that it's really not going to be as big as an issue as you thought it would, I think my journey with a lot of health resources would have been a lot smoother. So
love that. Well, you are a remarkable person, so
thank you.
Make sure you tell your younger self that.
Yeah, I'll call her later.
Okay.
I'll let her know.
Perfect. And one last one, because we like to add to the Simply Connected playlist around here.
Yes.
What is the current song you have playing on repeat right now?
You're gonna love this one because it's not a Lauren song at all. But it's called Guess by Charlie XCX.
Okay.
She just released a remix with Billie Eilish, and I like can't stop singing it and playing it. It's a little bit like house, like trappy music, and it's a little bit sexual, but it's a really fun like dance song, and it gets you jacked up for like any situation where you need a bit more energy. So I feel like it helps a lot of people, whether they're going to work or to the gym or just to get out of a funk. I think it's a good bop for that.
Okay, well, I love it. So it will be added to the Simply Connected playlist, and our listeners can tune in and bop along. But we want to thank you so much for being here today, for being our first guest, which is so exciting. And we will chat with you soon.
Thanks for having me, Lauren. Love you.